Thank you so much, Stephen, for the very kind introduction. And thank you, all the organizers, for having me here today. It's a pleasure. And as has been the theme for the last few presentations at today's workshop, I will also be talking about data donation. And in particular, I'll be talking about a platform called Candor that we have built and still continue to build and refine, particularly with an eye to collect social media data in a way that can support observational and causal analysis in the digital mental health context. So, the question of the relationship between social media and mental health, and in particular, how does social media shape our mental health? I would say it's been one of the outstanding and most pressing questions of our society today, and has been for the past several years. And it is a particularly tricky question, although on the surface it seems like a simple one. That's because social media platforms play so many different roles in our lives, right? On the one hand, we know that from our own anecdotal lives and evidence, we know that social media can foster emotional expression. It can provide peer support. It can instill the sense of connectedness. And yet, we also know how social media platforms can exacerbate or amplify challenges like anxiety, depression, stress, negative social interactions, harassment, exposure to misinformation, and the list goes on. So many scholars over the last several years have been looking at this question, sort of this reality that social media can be a double-edged sword. And we have seen a lot of work where scholars have observed time to time the many positives that social media brings, whether it is helping people with various mental health challenges during difficult moments, during important, major life events, helping people manage difficult times in their lives, helping people find their voices, especially when it comes to marginalized communities, or to find peer support when that may not be available in our offline contexts. At the same time, we also read news, and we see in the news almost every day, and that's not an exaggeration, about how social media like Instagram, Snapchat, or TikTok, these platforms are causing mental health problems in people, especially young people. How we read about how online streaming shows are glorifying, adverse outcomes such as suicide, and we hear from parents, we hear from lawmakers and members of the public about the increasing concerns about these platforms, and what is it that needs to be done to, curb the damages that these platforms are bringing about young people's mental health. So this question is hard for a number of reasons, and why we don't have a conclusive number yet. And let me walk you through a few of those knowledge gaps. One of the challenges is that a lot of the studies so far, we have relied on self-reports of social media use, but use is a very broad term, which I think we all would agree, and it lacks the nuance and the complexities of social media use. It's not just how long somebody is spending on social media that matters, but also what is happening in that time that they are on social media. Also, we have limited ecologically valid data, right? We don't know, how people are spending time on these platforms, what they're doing. And a lot of times, the studies that do look at what people are doing and look at the content of interactions, those studies have relied on publicly accessible social media data. But the vast majority of social media use happens in private contexts. And that kind of data currently has not quite been available. And then importantly, this relationship of social media and mental health is a bidirectional one. But most studies that we have seen so far in the field tend to be correlational, not causal. So we don't know whether social media causes improvement or worsening of mental health, or is it that people who have mental health struggles, or when people are feeling better, they tend to come to social media to use these platforms. And of course, social media is not a monolith, right? There are so many different platforms, and they look different every day because our experiences on these platforms are persistently shaped by algorithms, which themselves are live entities that evolve all the time. So there is no monolith of a social media that we are dealing with today, and that makes these kind of studies even harder. And of course, there are ethical challenges, right? You want to collect social media data, and use it to study mental health, but people don't come to social media to talk about their mental health. Maybe they do, but importantly, people don't come to these platforms thinking that their data could be used by researchers to study mental health. So there are all these complexities. And the question is, what do we do? How do we move forward? And that brings us to this data collection platform, Candor. And what I'm going to be talking about in the remainder of the time today is to walk you through our design rationale for the Candor platform, the motivations, what its features and characteristics are, what it enables, and then what kind of research and analysis of social media are possible that can allow us inch a little bit forward towards answering that question of how does social media causally shape our mental health. All right. So this might be something that has already been brought up earlier in the workshop today. One of the features around which data donation, social media data donation, is based on is this European Union regulation called the GDPR, or General Data Protection Regulation, which is a very complex and big one, but it provides. It's a regulation whose primary aim is to enhance social media users' control and rights over their personal data, and to simplify sort of the regulatory environment for international business for a lot of these social media platforms. One thing that GDPR also does, it addresses the transfer of how personal data would happen outside of EU and EEA related sort of areas. Like I said, GDPR is big and complex, but the part that is most relevant to our conversation today is the part about what is called the right of access. The right of access kind of focuses on this idea that anybody who uses social media would have the ability to obtain or download an archive of all of their data, depending upon what time duration they want, and keep it for themselves. So the very idea of data donation here is to see whether we could have consented individuals download a copy of their historical social media data that could then be donated for research purposes. So this is a typical workflow of how somebody would download an archive of the data from Facebook. Basically, you go to a certain place on the website, you request a download, you select the information there that you're willing to include in that archive. You can pick the duration of how long of a data you would want, because some of the users might be using these platforms for many, many years. You can also pick what format you want to download it in, and then you request the download. It becomes available in a variable amount of time, and you get notified through the email that is on your profile on when the download is available. So now, based on sort of this idea of GDPR-enabled data donation, over the last few years, we have built this platform called Candor, whose full form is Collecting and Analyzing Network Data for Open Research. You can search for Candor, Georgia Tech. It would pull up a website that has information on how the download process works. It is a highly interactive website which provides simple to understand language of what happens in the life cycle of data donation, going from the export of the data to uploading the data to the transfer of the data to secure servers. What happens to the data once it is donated, what kind of de-identification it goes through, and then what kind of possible analysis are possible downstream. At the moment, our platform, Candor, supports a number of different platforms, and it's been built and is constantly evolving through a number of different funded efforts. And the idea here is that it allows individuals to get these unique URLs where they could go to and upload their data on any of these platforms that you see shown on the slide. And they can also find out what is possible with their data. So our platform has many robust mechanisms in place to ensure the safety and security of this donated data. And we have a safety protocol to manage sensitive data. I will walk you through some of those considerations in just a second. It is also built on a multidimensional safety framework. For instance, if it is collecting data from children or people under the age of platform, we have a mechanism in place that allows us to tackle, mandated child abuse reporting systems. It allows us to obtain a detailed legal review. It has a risk mitigation plan that involves contacting law enforcement. The data that is collected is protected through an NIH certificate of confidentiality so that the data cannot be subpoenaed in case of a lawsuit. And in all of these collections, we partner with mental health domain experts and clinicians, in addition to sort of your conventional IRB retrieval. IRB approval. The front end of our platform, Candor, it is essentially what is called a Flask app. It is hosted on secure servers at Georgia Tech. At the back end, we have a Postgres database for storage of registered participant IDs, logs of their interaction on this portal, and data files. And these are all maintained with a two-factor authenticated server behind the VPN and behind Georgia Tech firewall. The way we manage authentication for this platform is through what is called the principle of least privilege. So people are given access to only those pieces of data that they need for their work, not more. So that minimizes the risk of inadvertent access and viewing of data that are not authorized for people who should be looking at that. So as I mentioned, we are supporting many platforms at the moment, and it's an ever expanding list because, as I mentioned earlier on in the talk, social media is not a monolith. These platforms are constantly evolving, but also newer platforms are coming, older platforms are fading away, and also the platform choice would vary based on the population of interest. So for our conversation today, I'm going to be largely focusing on two platforms that are the two most widely used platforms for adolescents and young adults, and that is Instagram and TikTok. But as you can see, our platform supports data collection from other platforms, and we have been collecting data from a number of other platforms outside of Instagram and TikTok as well. That includes Google, Twitter, Reddit, and so on. So what kind of studies are made possible through this type of data donation? So there are so many study designs, and I'll tell you a little bit about the kind of data that we can get. So this platform doesn't support real-time data collection. So the kinds of studies that are possible through them are essentially these case control studies, right? Because you are collecting at any point in time historical data going backwards, the most recent of which could be data when the data donation was requested. So it allows for case control designs where you can obtain information from the social media data on a number of different things that are of interest. These are sort of your typical independent variables or factors. They could be present or absent. And you can imagine, for simplicity's sake, you're interested in two different groups, cases and controls. You can define what they are. And then you can historically see sort of which kind of factors are present or absent across your cases and controls. And you can kind of set up a causal design through that process. All right, so let me talk a little bit about the overall architecture. I already talked to you about the high levels design of Candor. So what happens is that a study coordinator or a researcher approaches a participant who satisfies some exclusion criteria or satisfies some screening procedure. The researcher explains to the participant what the study is, what kind of that social media data is requested, what is the purpose of collecting social media data, and if it's a young participant, we obtain assent and consent from the legal guardian, or if it's a person over the age of 18, they sign a consent form. After they do that, we automatically generate a unique URL based on the automatically generated participant ID of this consented individual. And the researcher then shares that URL, which is a URL linked to the Candor portal with this participant. This is the website that you see at the bottom of the slide. The study coordinator then provides a manual and also verbally explains to the participant how they could request a download of their social media data and walk them through any questions that they might have. So the participant requests the data, and the study coordinator explains to them that the data might become available immediately, or it might take anywhere from next day to the next month for the data to be available. So the participant leaves, or maybe the participant does other activities, fills out some surveys, other parts of the study, but the social media piece wraps up here. And the study coordinator kind of contacts the participant in a periodic manner to see if they have received a download of the data yet. Once they do, the study coordinator instructs the participant how to upload the data on that unique URL that was shared with them. And once that data is uploaded by the participant, it hits a public-facing server. So this is the server with which the participant interfaces. Here it's called Vorcha. And then on Vorcha, we kind of have a backend API that allows the study coordinator or the researcher to interact. For instance, the study coordinator would know whether the data file was correctly uploaded, when it was uploaded, and collect all of that information. After the data hits the Vorcha, the data gets automatically transferred to a server called Troy, which is the main backend server where the data lives. No data actually lives on the public-facing server. It's just sort of for temporary holding of the information. Troy, the backend server is behind two-factor authentication on the Georgia Tech firewall. It's not publicly accessible. And that's where data is anonymized, data is processed in a certain way, and then it's saved in a certain database. So that's kind of the high-level mechanics of how the whole process works. We also have another instantiation of this architecture that can allow us to pair social media data with personal health information, for which we have to ensure that the data lives in a HIPAA-compliant server. So one addition that we have in one instantiation is once the social media data is de-identified and processed, it is then transferred to this HIPAA-compliant server that is maintained by a special team at Georgia Tech, has all the protections in place. And that's where, if you're interested to, for instance, pair the social media data with electronic health records, it is possible in that environment. It's a completely offline internal machine. As you can see, the HIPAA-compliant server has no connection with the outwardly facing server or the participant. So it is a very secure environment. So how is this data stored? We iterated over many formats, and what we eventually landed on was to save these processed data in Parquet files. There are many ways to save data. Obviously, CSV is the most simple one. But the nice feature about Parquet files is that it is naturally compressed. In fact, it has a 33% saving in terms of these large files or large data sets. And some of these participants we have seen have large amounts of social media data. So it's not just it takes less space, it is more economical that way, but also reading Parquet files is easier. It improves, it allows us to scan, because sometimes we have thousands of files across these participants, and it also improves the deserialization time. So the way that in a folder or directory, the way you read one file and then go to the next one. The other nice thing about Parquet files is that it's very modular and it's easy to share, or it has sort of all of the features of this database, of a conventional database, but without sort of the heavy weight or sort of baggage that comes with a more conventional database. Conventional databases can be pretty slow, especially when you're dealing with text or video data. When you're dealing with unstructured data, conventional databases are not so good. So here is just a simple output processing format for Instagram direct messaging data, which are essentially conversational data between our participant and other people. How about videos? Because as I mentioned earlier, two of the most prominent platforms that young people use are Instagram and TikTok, and both of them are very media rich. So we kind of needed a separate pipeline to deal with these multimedia data or video data. So the thing about a lot of video data, especially for TikTok, is that the archives only give you the URLs. It doesn't give you the actual videos. So we kind of have sort of a browser-based user agent, which allows us to pull the actual video content through an API to our server. It is a pretty slow process, but at this time we are using GPUs to pull the data, so we have improved on the speed quite a bit, but it continues to be sort of a lingering challenge. We convert these into the standard compressed format, which is MP4 format. We also save a number of other types of metadata information for these videos, as you can see on this slide. So let me talk to you a little bit about sort of our security protections, which has been a really critical aspect of the design of our tool. So as you can see, our system security has many layers and many types of features to ensure that we are protected. We have a lot of coverage, and we are protected in a maximal way. So we have multi-layered safeguards. For instance, obviously there is physical access controls. These servers where the data leaves, they are physically located in some basement on the Georgia Tech campus that only maybe a few people have access to. I, for instance, cannot get into that room, although technically I'm the PI of collecting all of this data. There are software encryptions. HTTPS is the only way we share any data. People SSH into these Linux machines, and we have very strict firewall protections. And we had to go through something called classified usage of information, a special kind of security check to ensure that we have a notch higher firewall protections compared to other kinds of servers on campus. But one thing that we have built into our system security control is that it is not a one-shot approach that you implement it once and you forget about it. Continuous protection is very critical. So we have a regular patch management for all of these machines. We have monthly or semi-monthly scans of different vulnerabilities. We have auditing that happens in a periodic manner, and there are sort of these automated malware detection to ensure that at any point in time, the server maintains the level of security compliance that is mandated for the level of sensitivity in this data. All right. So now let me shift gears a little bit to talk about what do the different stakeholders interacting with the Candor portal see. So we have different views for that. And I'm going to first talk about an important stakeholder within the use of the Candor portal, and these are the study coordinators. So this feature is still sort of under development. We are going to be pushing it out over the next few weeks. But we have built sort of this high-level overview, sort of a portal for any specific project where there is ongoing data collection. So the way this works is the study coordinator kind of sees this dashboard where they can see what phase of the study it is, because some of the studies that we are collecting data for are longitudinal studies. So you can pick baseline, or like there is a 6-month follow-up or a year follow-up or whatever that is. You can see which participants are in our data yet, what phase of data collection was last for each of these participants, and kind of you have a high-level overview of which platform data that they have donated. And that part is not just yes or no. There can be errors, as we have encountered in the use of these platforms. Sometimes connections fail. Sometimes the file is simply too large. Sometimes the participant may not have had a stable internet connection. So sometimes these data uploads fail, and this information is recorded in this database, and this provides transparency to the study coordinators so that they can see where any errors, if at all, are, and they can then recontact the participant and or work with our engineering team to sort this out. There is also an ability to export this table to a file, and there is also an ability for the study coordinator to see some aggregated statistics based on sort of this table, which they can filter as they like. Like, let's say they're only interested in participants in phase 3 who have donated TikTok data. So they can filter from this table, and they can, get some aggregated statistics on that. So now, it's important that, a study coordinator is, there could be various types. There could be different roles, and not everybody may not be interested in the same dashboard. So what we have done is different people with an administrative role who are part of this project can have their own personal logins with different levels of control and permissions. So maybe there is somebody in the study who has the ability to, let's say, remove participants from the database because this participant withdraw from the study. This can happen in a longitudinal study design, right? Somebody withdraws, so their data has to be removed. So a certain person in the study team would have the ability to now, log in with their personal credentials. They will have their own account, and they can then take out the data. They can also, add manually new participants, view the tables. They can, do some of these administrative tasks that may be restricted for other members of the study team. So that is one view of the Candor portal, which is interfacing with the study coordinators. But what about the other important stakeholder in this, which are the participants themselves, right? What do they see? This is also sort of a work in progress that we hope to roll out in the next few weeks. But we are toying with this idea of providing essentially periodic reports or an interactive interface on Candor that is unique to the data that has been donated by a participant. So obviously, as you can imagine, at these studies, participants are monetarily compensated, financially compensated. But many times we have seen, especially for young adult or teen participants, they want to understand their social media data better. So this report or this interface is built in that ethos. And as you can see, this is based on a person's real data. Our report would tell them things like how much they're using a platform like Instagram. It would tell them about their reciprocal social relationships or other kinds of ties that they have based on interactions on Instagram. It would also tell them about their interactions over time, who they're interacting with, how much they're interacting with, whether they're largely sort of, interacting, whether most of the interactions are sort of outbound, like they are contacting other people and interacting with them, or other people are doing that more, or like what is sort of the reciprocity in that process. And it also can give them a sense of their level of activity over any time of the day or any day of the week, which is what you see on the right bottom of the slide. So the idea is, once participants donate the data, they obtain this report. There could be an ability to obtain this report if they come back for a follow-up. So much time, weeks or months later, then they can get an updated report. It can also be a nice way for them to keep an explainable and interpretable version of that data, because some of these archives are really big, and a lot of times people are wondering what is in this data set, and is there something I can learn about myself that can support my self-reflective or mindfulness practices for whatever reason, and the report can fulfill sort of that need or desire for them. But aside from them, the Candor portal also gives high-level overview of what can be done with their data once they have donated it. And these are not based on real data, because this is something more sort of like an educational manual that the participants can access. So for privacy reason, we did not use their anybody's real data, but these are synthetic data which have been generated with AI. And but they are realistic looking in that they are motivated and stylistically similar to real data of young people. And the idea here is to tell them that, for instance, based on your direct message exchanges, researchers could obtain information about our emotional expression, and what does emotional expression mean and how it is detected. And again, using sort of a layperson language to explain that. We also tell them about how one way their data could be used is to understand language use and how is language use detected. Similarly, that there are different kinds of behavioral markers that could be measured, and different kinds of psycholinguistic attributes that can be inferred. What are psycholinguistic attributes? What does it mean? Things like that. Or for instance, their social interactions, their resilience, their coping, these things could be measured from their data. And these are some of the ways that these things could be inferred from their social media. Or for instance, some mental health dimensions could also be inferred from their data, for instance, stress or anxiety, and how they are detected. Again, in a, not in a technical language, but in a very simple way. For instance, you see, like, you have social media data, then there is some kind of feature extraction, and then we kind of do some kind of prediction or assessment of a mental health event or outcome, such as stress or anxiety. So that's kind of the design of the portal. Let me tell you now a little bit about what you can do with the data that is being collected through this process, and how do we process data. And as I mentioned earlier, there are two dimensions to this. One is text, other is video. So let me start with text. Here is the overall pipeline of how we would analyze a very prominent source of text data for us. The example that we are looking at here are Instagram direct message interactions. As I mentioned earlier, these are essentially conversations that are taking place between a participant and their friends. And these are private conversations. They could be one-to-one, or they could involve multiple people in a chat. So we have sort of the zipped raw data that we obtain in our preferred format is JSON, but our system can also handle HTML. We extract data fields from it. We extract text or videos. We extract metadata. It goes through a de-identification pipeline. That is what you see on the left of the screen. These are processed into Parquet files that I mentioned earlier, which is our preferred output format. And after that, the data goes through a cleaning process, automated, metric extraction, also automated. And then we kind of do whatever analysis that might be of interest for a specific project. as you can imagine, de-identification is a really key aspect of this process, which can allow secure sharing of data between different members within a larger project. It is also very important because one of the things that we discuss with our potential participants is that we wouldn't be manually reviewing their social media data. To the extent possible, the analysis will happen in an automated way using machine learning and natural language processing techniques, and we would de-identify the data. Still, we would de-identify the data to the extent possible. So we need that to ensure that participants feel safe with that process. So how does the de-identification process work? Here is the approach for text, and I'll talk about video in just a second. So we have sort of, let's say, the text. In this case, it could be the Instagram direct message text. We use a state-of-the-art benchmark tool called Microsoft Presidio, which allows us to use it locally because we cannot send the data to a cloud or an external service. And then we augment the Presidio de-identification module with some custom models that we have built, because we are dealing with data from young people and they have all sorts of coded language, and we have incorporated custom modules for de-identification. But as you can imagine, it is sort of we are always catching up. So the kind of things that we de-identify include things like email addresses, phone numbers, names of people, locations that they are in, social security numbers, URLs, usernames of other people, addresses, and so on. And then we replace them with generic tokens, and that's how we get the de-identified text. We also have an interface. I'm going to not show the demo in the interest of time here, that allows us to see how the de-identification is working, and if there is some manual review needed to check for the veracity or the quality of the de-identification for a specific project, we can do that. Again, this level of human intervention is essential because every data set is unique, and every population or subpopulation can have those coded languages that may need sort of some more custom de-identification that may not be available in sort of off-the-shelf algorithms. So how good is this de-identification for text? These are some overall metrics on a small sample of just over 300 messages. And if you see in terms of accuracy, precision, recall, we do pretty well. We do better in terms of locations, not as good in terms of names of people. And that's understandable because there could be unique names of people. There are cross cultural elements. There could be biases in existing data. So we are sort of working on augmenting the person name de-identification module. All right. So let me tell you a little bit about video processing, which is sort of the other kind of data that we are looking at here. This is sort of the overall pipeline for video processing in our work. So we have, for one particular, we've taken the example of one particular project in which we are pulling TikTok videos from young people. And we have a large data set of, over 200,000 videos that have been pulled already. So the way we process TikTok videos is we create sort of these embeddings, which are high dimensional representations, AI representations of the content that encodes information that is being said, which is the audio part, or things that are being visualized, which is sort of the visual part of it, the video part of it. But we also obtain transcriptions, which is the actual words that are being said in the video. And once we obtain the embeddings and the transcriptions, which includes all of the dimensions of information, audio, how things are being said, what things are being said, and how it is being shown in the video. We combine that and we have a de-identification module, after which we can conduct analysis. So how do we generate embeddings? We have experimented with various existing machine learning models that are open source for video classification tasks. And we settled on two, which are VideoMay and XClip. These are the most popular, and these are actively maintained models. We have been quite successful in generating embeddings using XClip, for instance. We have been able to, not be able to process a very small number of videos. As you can see here, out of 64, almost 65,000, only 22 videos couldn't be processed. This is a lot of processing time, which is 5 hours something, which is a lot considering that TikTok videos are super short, just a few seconds, right? But we have been able to capture rich video data. We have been able to capture 8 frames per video, which we found was a nice compromise between sort of having very large videos with many frames and also the not having enough information that can not incorporate or include all of the information that is desired. So how about the transcripts? As I mentioned earlier, one thing that we also want to encode for videos is not just how things are being said or visualized, but also what exactly is being said on those videos, for which we generate these transcripts. We have explored 2 models for speech-to-text conversion. One is speech recognition, and the other is Whisper, which is kind of a state-of-the-art tool by OpenAI. And what we have seen from our manual evaluation is that Whisper is performing better, which is consistent with other work in the computer vision field. And what we have seen is very interestingly, we were able to generate transcripts for a number of videos, but there are also a large number of videos on TikTok that are largely music or text. There is no audio aspect to it to transcribe. So we are working on another extension where we will be looking to analyze the music that are being that are present in these videos. And then there's a long literature on how music relates to mental health, and it opens new doors for new kinds of analysis. So in terms of de-identification, now that we have the embeddings and we have the transcripts of these videos, how do we de-identify them? So video de-identification is more tricky. It's not just identifying faces, but there could be, just like in text, there could be all kinds of other personally identifying information in them, right? So we want to make sure that the video embeddings are privacy safe, because the embeddings can unintentionally contain, usernames, faces, social security numbers, you name it, right? And we want to do this de-identification in a way that doesn't, lose their usefulness for analysis. So there are a couple of de-identification methods that we are looking at for videos. One is sort of noise injection, which is you perturb or introduce just a little bit of information to each embedding that makes it difficult to kind of reverse engineer to the original. And we are also looking at compression using various techniques. Compression often transfers raw data into a lower dimensional space. So then going backwards often is not possible. All right, so these are sort of the high-level design and goals of the Candor platform. As you can see, this is an ever-evolving project, the first one of its kind that at least I have worked on. There are lots of things to still address. One is obviously the elephant in the room, like the generalizability of these data, right? It takes a certain kind of person to donate their social media data. The question is, if this becomes the predominant way of collecting and analyzing social media data in sort of the post-API age, then what are sort of the features we need to include that ensures generalizability, but also scalability over time? One thing we are looking at quite closely is Europe's DSA Act, which might provide some automated APIs for collecting these kind of donated data that would further automate a lot of the things within the Candor portal and would reduce the chances of failures or errors that might trickle. And of course, there is the part about connecting candor with other kinds of data. I already talked about our capability to connect it with electronic health record data, but also you can imagine other data that might be important or interesting. Obviously, survey data, which is very important, but also things such as EMAs or wearable data or smartphone sensing data. How will candor work in tandem with those other forms of data collection? So that's kind of what I have for you today. Just it was a walkthrough of the design of candor and some of the challenges we have encountered, some of the things that we have done to overcome them. And I would love to hear more of your thoughts or your own experiences of collecting this kind of information. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. That was a super amazing presentation, and I will say I was getting lots of questions as well as the questions that are in the Q&A. Maybe starting with one of the Q&A questions. There's a question about how you might look at different types of interactions across different platforms to understand more about how users are using different platforms. So can you talk a little bit about how, given that you can collect data from a lot of different data sources with candor, is there anything it does that kind of helps look at the comparability or the differences that you might see in like interactions across, say, like TikTok or Instagram data or things like that?
Yeah, so there are things that are easier to do and things that are hard. So the things that are easier to do and something that we are already observing is that Instagram is a very popular platform for private conversations. We see sort of almost many of these young people, like teenagers, using Instagram primarily to chat with their friends, kind of using it as a texting service. But we expected that to be also the case for TikTok for these same people, because TikTok also provides a direct messaging capability. But turns out, at least what we have seen so far, is that it is not very popular. These same people don't like to use TikTok for talking to their friends. What they use TikTok for is to watch videos from their friends. They would save video, they would watch videos, they would save videos. So there are sort of these interesting ways that the same person might use different platforms, sometimes to interact, sometimes to consume information. And that can have a lot of potential in how we, combine different types of signals to understand things like mental health outcomes. But the things that are hard, as I said earlier, are things like, one thing that you might want to study, someone might want to study is that, let's say I have a friend, Alice, and another friend, Bob. Do I chat with Alice more on Instagram, less on TikTok, or with Bob the other way around? And there's no way to do that because Alice and Bob might have different usernames on TikTok and Instagram. So those kinds of studies are harder.
Great. I see a couple questions about different types of things that you're looking at or could look at. I might kind of like combine these and frame. Are there any sort of constructs or concepts that you've been really interested in terms of the relationship between social media and mental health that you think are like really hard to capture with this data, or things that you feel like you've been interested in and find that like you think that these data can speak to like really, really well in ways that maybe self-reports aren't able to capture?
Yeah, for sure. I ran out of time for that. But one of the things that we found really valuable is social support, because Instagram is so heavily used for these one-on-one or multi-party interactions. It provides us a great window into seeing how people might have supportive friends or not so supportive friends. And we are kind of building sort of this a generative AI-based classifier that would allow us to rank messages that a participant might be receiving from their friends in terms of the levels of emotional or informational support. And we can do that over the course of time or over the course of a conversation. And that gives us very rich information into not just seeing whether someone feels they have social support or not, but also how that changes over time, and also the kind of support that they might be getting from different friends. So do people have a course that are very supportive friends, or is it that they get support from a large number of friends? So those kind of questions can be answered through this data. And the other one is Harassment, toxicity, bullying, those are some of the negative things that young people experience online. And again, we have seen that by looking at sort of these private conversations on social media, it can tell us about what kinds of negativity are often directed or perceived by these young people. Can we quantify that? Can we identify what are particularly toxic conversations? Because those could be different for different individuals. And how do we, again, understand how these things change over time? And that can open doors for interventions, right? How do we support these individuals, provide them coping or resiliency tactics to overcome these kind of negative interactions?
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, I'm sure people have many more questions. I have more questions, but unfortunately we're out of time. So thank you so much for your presentation. This was really, really informative. We're actually having a little bit longer of a break now before the next session. And I think Bethany will put a slide up for us, but now we will be having a break until 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. So get up, take a stretch, get energized for the next set of sessions. We have several more sessions that I think are really, really great. So thank you again, Munmun. And thanks everyone for your time, and we'll see you folks back in 30 minutes. And you can feel free to leave the Zoom open if you want.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you, Bethany. And thank you everyone for joining on a weekend.